Let's talk for just a second about like ClickUp and house format, because I do think it's worth noting that maybe for the last 9 months, we sort of played around at the extremes of how should a company's documentation live in this like AI world. All right, welcome back to Redacted. I'm your host, David Shaner. I'm here with my co-host, Taylor Cotner. And Redacted is a show about what it's like to actually integrate AI into a working company in 2026. So no polished theory, no clickbait, just me and Taylor taking turns screen sharing everything that we built since the last time that we talked. So if you prefer to listen, feel free to keep this on as a podcast. If you ever are wondering what the heck we're talking about, you can find our YouTube channel where you'll see all of the screen sharing. And one thing that we added, I think it was after last episode, is show notes. So you'll hear us talk about things in the podcast, we really want to make this podcast for people that are building and interested in building. And so we thought, hey, what if show notes were just a GitHub repo and every episode can be a folder in the GitHub repo with a sanitized version of something that we were building. That way you can pull it down and play with it. So look for that after the show. All right, Taylor, how you doing?
Good. I was out for 2 weeks. We went on a little vacation after school ended to Europe, got back, had a million updates from the many repos that I work on and you work on and Offline works on. And the main thing that I noticed when I came back was, I'm just going to throw it up here now, this new board in ClickUp. I can make this a little bit larger, called the AI-ification engine for offline. And so like, as I'm wont to do, I'm like, I don't need to ask anybody about this. I'm just going to like read through the commits. You know, you're really good at putting the like, you know, you're good at putting stuff in the repos, like the internal repos. And maybe that's something we chat about too. But then I can just ask Claude, like, why does this exist? Right. And so the things that we've like leveled up at offline, I think over the past, I'd say 3 or 4 weeks we have a marketplace for offline skills now. That is a set of Claude plugins that automatically update to everybody's computer. Pretty cool. Anybody at offline can update those and then they just kind of get pulled down. So that's like bringing everything together where we can all use it. But I think that opened up a couple, and that's where I saw this like AI-ification engine like start to be noticed in like when I pulled down the internal repo with the skills for the plugins for the marketplace that offline has. It's like nesting Russian nesting dolls. I noticed that there was this thing that was referenced about a ClickUp board that you needed to work through to actually like implement AI in a way that is repeatable, or like there's just a structure around it now. And the short version that I think it is that you have a process that you want to automate and you need to make it go through all these channels. Process mapping, we've talked about a lot on this podcast specifically. I think in the show notes, there's your process mapping skill. There is a specific process mapping skill, which I think is the one that you have in the repo, which is the thing that we use. And I'm not going to go through all of it because what I ended up realizing was you had put a couple of the things that I've been working on in this board to where you think they were. Right. Some of them were in architecture, which is like, how are we going to put this out there for everybody to use? Some of them were in process mapping. Some of them were in triage. And I realized that if I was going to follow this structure or tool, whatever it meant, like I needed to put them all back through. And the thing that I'm putting back through was a thing that we've been talking about forever since the beginning of this podcast, which I will one day not have to talk about anymore, which is the offline agents for lead gen that we've been working on, which I have now rebuilt a third time. Not showing that today. Everybody, I think, needs the break from that one. But it ended up being something, this like Kanban board that I was like, oh, actually, I made like 12 different skills, but only 3 of them are actual processes that we're trying to automate. And I just kind of got lost in the sauce a little bit when I was building it, to be like, oh, we have 12 processes now. It's like, no, you actually only have a couple, right? And one of them is, what if you had a company and it was a new company and that's a new lead? What's that process like? Or what if you have what we call, again, restaurant event, which is a signal from outside of offline that we want to track and try to reconcile with our existing restaurants. And if we don't do that, we make a new company in HubSpot. All of this is basically just like, again, sentient HubSpot ideas, right? And there's some very opinionated structures in the skill to be able to put something through this flow, right?
Yeah.
And that's basically what I spent on Friday, when I got back last week, Friday and Monday doing. And let me show I don't know if there's an easy one, but like I went through and did the let's use company as lead, the process one. That's like the most understandable one. A new restaurant opens, someone just tells me like when I'm out, and I'm like, great, this is a lead. So
before we screen share that, let me give a little background on how this happened, because Taylor goes out for a couple weeks, and in the backdrop of this, I've had this like in the back of my mind for a long time, of how do you take something that a company is already doing, and I call like AI-ify it. That's why it's called the AI-ification engine. And I think what's happened here is that it's June 30th, we're recording this. Like for the last 6 months, you and I have been working on offline. We've also been doing some consulting. Like we're getting a larger sample size now of how AI-ification happens both inside of offline and from scratch inside of other businesses that we don't know anything about. And so this like crock pot has been boiling for a while for me, of like, what is this consistent method that I keep feeling like I go back to take somebody gives me a call. Hey, I'm trying to automate blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to apply AI to blah, blah, blah. What is it that my brain like keeps going back to? And there were already some breadcrumbs here, like process mapping. And so it was just sort of abstracting what that process has been across all these different companies. So let me just step through really quickly what the stages are, and then what the best analogy is, in my opinion. So the first thing that we've talked about a lot on this podcast already is you have to map the process. AI is really good at impersonating a process that you've already proven creates value inside of your company. It's really bad at making up processes from scratch. Processes provide kind of these natural deterministic guardrails for AI. Then once you have your process, you have to answer the question, okay, if my agent was going to try to run this process, does it have all the necessary context? Does it have all of the APIs, the MCPs, the tribal knowledge to run through that process correctly? Then there was this stage that I kept finding myself reaching for that follows that, which I'm calling input-output collection. It's like, is there any raw data set that you can essentially use to build the first version of the automation, where, hey, before AI, here's what some inputs to this process looked like, and here's what some outputs looked like. So in the offline world, maybe it's like, here's what a new type form looked like when a restaurant was reaching out to us. Here's what the email looked like that we sent them. Here's how we set them up in HubSpot. That would be an example of an input-output. Then the next stage is the agent tries to impersonate that process. So now we have a process, we have all the context connected, we have some examples of what good looks like in the human version. Now let's go see if we can get an agent to impersonate that. That's almost like the MVP of the AI-ification. Then you move to architecture. And I think architecture is something that consulting has made me more and more aware of, because I'm not working in that business 24/7. And so I have to be able to step away from it. It has to be able to be hosted somewhere. It has to be able to be accessible to end users. So the architecture spike in this like system represents, where am I going to put this thing now so that it can run autonomously without me? And I'm not a bottleneck. It's not running on my machine necessarily. It's not like going to go down in the middle of the night. Then you move into deployment, which is, essentially enacting that architecture. And then the final two phases are what I'm calling iterative loop and ongoing evaluation. So iterative loop is just recognizing that there's a stage where you have to babysit that new AI automation for maybe 5 to 10 runs to make sure it's like doing the right thing. So it's, no different than launching a feature in your software and like watching it closely to make sure it's not failing. And then ongoing evaluation, how do you step away from it and measure that it's running and that it's running the right way? So that's the whole like pipeline. You can see this is very different than just like a quote unquote development process. And so I think the analogy is actually more like a hiring process. And I've said this in a couple of our offline internal meetings recently. When you're hiring, like if you think of AI as a new hire, which is essentially what it is for a very small chunk of your company, when you're hiring someone, the first thing you do is you have to have some part of your business that's definable and repeatable enough to staff it. That's kind of what process mapping forces you to do. Then you have to make sure that the person you're hiring has access to all the tools they need. They've got Gmail, they've got, they can get into ClickUp, they can get into GitHub. That, like, you have to provision all of this access. That's context. Input and output's a form of training. Like, you would do this if you hire a salesperson, right? You might say, here's what a signed contract looks like. Here's what an implemented restaurant looks like. Here's what a lead looks like. And then essentially the impersonation, the iterative loop is very similar to having a new salesperson, do a like dry pitch on the team before they go out and try it on with customers, then riding shotgun for their first 5 sales calls to make sure they're selling the right way. And then ongoing evaluation is no different than, hey, we're going to have a quarterly performance review. So this to me is like HR for AI. It's like agent ops. And so once I had that down on paper, to your point, we have all these different things inside of offline that never really went through anything rigorous. And so we're having to kind of walk them back and place them on this board.
Yeah.
All right. So apparently my sultry microphone was not working. So apologies that you had to listen to my voice that way.
That's fine. Okay. So maybe you can do some grading for this one, for the company as lead process, knowing that I've done a bunch of stuff and built it, but like going from process mapping to context mapping, I ended up with, let me open up another thing too. This is where our like offline way system.
Command K, baby.
Oh, yeah, no, I have it open. So I ended up being like, actually, this agent system has a bunch of tools too that are not processes. So like these that actually were all deterministic. And so it was like, you don't need to make these into the process. So like cleanup, right? These are basically like cleanup systems or like expansion from existing companies. So we don't need to worry about them. What I was able to do, these were originally 3 different processes in this map, the engine. And I was like, oh, I don't need to do these because the actual process is the company as lead process thing here. Let me make it a little bit easier to read. Every time Claude updates anything in ClickUp, it overwrites the entire document. So I have to drag it to be readable for a person. So this is a format that you defined in the ClickUp skill that offline has now to put the flow of something into this thing we call a house format. And it's got a step, which, it's just ordered number, the actual name of it, the actor, whether it's a person or an AI directly or an interaction between the two, notes, and LLM access. So I didn't really quite understand this until I tried to have it read a bunch of the other ones. And then I was like, well, can I read it? And so I did a couple adjustments, so the company is lead process. There's a trigger where a company is put forward to be evaluated as a lead. And we're not going to read all of this stuff, but this all theoretically works with live HubSpot stuff. And so there's no more proxy database. I've gotten rid of that idea. As a short aside, the proxy database was fine for a while, but I found out it was too annoying to keep synced properly. And if you just call HubSpot directly and you whitelist the fields that you want it to, it won't kill the context of Claude when it pulls down 1,000 fields, right? So you give it a tool that's great, use this tool to pull the HubSpot API stuff, but ignore all these other fields. And so it's the tool, the Python script or whatever it is, probably JavaScript, is whitelisting the stuff that the model needs, not giving it everything that it could possibly see from HubSpot. That's kind of how I solved that little problem of it getting overloaded. So
right, because basically the whole reason you went down that proxy database path is because when you pull a company record or something, there's God knows how many fields in HubSpot, right? 200 and something, and even if they're null or whatever, empty, it still pulls down the key, and it bloats the context.
Yeah, for every company, if you pull 100 companies, it's 100 times as many useless fields. So that seemed to be working a lot better.
And let's talk for just a second about ClickUp and house format, because I do think it's worth noting that maybe for the last 9 months, we sort of played around at the extremes of how should a company's documentation live in this AI world, right? And we went all the way to just GitHub repo, everything's marked down, and we've boomeranged back for things like this, where we do feel like we need some UI wrapper. ClickUp, Notion, doesn't really necessarily matter, but somewhere for docs to render and to be all of us are looking at the same version at the same time.
Yeah.
It's not oh, my repo's out of sync, and so I have a different version of the company lead process. So we have been finding, I think, more of a middle ground there, and so that's what led us back to ClickUp. I think the difference, and you can see it if you're looking at Taylor's screen, is that an old SOP was literally what you would expect. It was headings and sub bullets and text. And this thing we're calling our house format is how do you take a traditional SOP that's designed to be just for people to look at and train on to something that looks a little bit more like what we would call machine gated, where there's these very distinct steps. Each of those steps is either performed by the LLM or automation or a human or a hybrid. And we can put all that in a table to see step one, here's what the actual step is. Is it a robot or a human that performs it? What are there any notes about it? And then from a context mapping, going back to the process, you have your process, you got to figure out if the agent can access all the context. We have a column for that. Can an LLM perform this step, or is it missing something, tacit knowledge, access, whatever, and you can see all that. And it just putting it into a skill makes it consistent across the company. So if I'm making a process, Taylor's making a process, Paige's making a process, Steve's making a process, it's not like we all have our own little quirky ways that we used to write them, and you could kind of tell oh, David wrote this one, Taylor wrote this one.
Yeah.
Now it's all standard. So
yeah, and again, this is my first foray into this. When I used this skill, it was very much too AI friendly, because what I was doing was translating existing code into a process, which is not where you would start, right? Because I had built this entire lead process thing already. And I was like, well, I need to backfill it just to make sure I see it. And I think it's still a little bit like incorrect, but like over high level, you start from a single company, it grabs it from HubSpot. It breaks if it doesn't have these API keys. Again, that's very like AI specific, but the bot needs it, right? Since it's not a human doing it. Then there's a gate. I added this the other day to have the idea of like, it's either going to stop here or keep going. And it's just like, in this world, it's a cheap screen. Like if we know the information that it's a franchise or a chain or it's closed or it's a parent company outside of our geo, whatever, we're just going to skip it, right? We're not going to do anything with it. So it fetches, and it short circuits before this thing where it gathers some evidence. So I might move that in a different spot, but that lets me see this now and be like, oh, actually, we probably should do a little bit more research first because we might not have that franchise information. And so if this is correct with what the app is doing that I built, it's actually not what I want.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like that's the whole justification for this, is that if all of that stuff just lives behind the Claude code interface in Markdown and you're not viewing it as a process or viewing it in any sort of format like this, it starts to slip into this like invisible, it's again, going back to like hiring people and stuff. If you don't have a process that your people are following and you don't actually know what it is, when they're doing something that makes no sense, how do you know? Like, how do you troubleshoot it? Right. You just know the outputs are bad at the end and you're like, oh, like, show me your work. What did you do?
Yeah. And so this next step where it's, research it and judge the lead fit, the research should go a little bit higher, right? Because it might research it and find it's a chain, and then we don't actually care,
How is this different than just straight up qualification? Like, isn't it just qualifying?
This is qualifying, but you're starting at a company. So like, this is again the idea that like this is the whole process of if you give it a company, it's going to go down. Let me just like high level go through it. It's going to qualify it. It's going to reconcile like the company and try to link it to other companies if it can. It's going to create the deal if it needs to. If there's no deal, it's going to prep the outreach brief and it's going to route the lead into the outreach bucket and draft that email for Steve. This is like the beginning to end, everything. Like the qualification skill is within this one, and it works in a different way than the restaurant event qualification skill because it's a different object. It's got to do different stuff. And that's where I started getting very spaghetti, like tangled up with myself as I was building this. Cause I was like, we have a qualified skill, but like it works differently for all of these things. Like a restaurant event, again, which is just like something we maybe saw on a blog. We need to like do way more with that. We have to like clean it, see if we could find out where it is, try to link it to an existing company. And then like, if that then we're here where we are qualifying it. Right. But you could also qualify a restaurant in our world, a restaurant event up front, because it's just a closed restaurant. Right. And we saw it and we're like, oh, this actually isn't a lead. This is just a thing that we need to qualify at this first level to be like, should we even spend the time to do something else with it?
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of started getting like, this started helping with that to be like, yeah, like you could subgroup this into qualify the company, right?
Yeah.
And we just haven't gotten there yet because we just started doing these like super intense ones in here. But in the old days, when we had like, a couple of years ago, when we were doing this kind of stuff, there would be a set of nested SOPs, right? That never got followed because they were a set of nested SOPs. So,
well, it also like one of the things I was thinking about while you're talking is that like how much more useful it is when me and you and Steve and Paige are having a conversation about whether the company as a lead, like whether this whole project is working or not, to be able to talk at this altitude and have something that we're all looking at to see if like the higher level logic and strategy makes sense versus the the development level code and evals and stuff like that. And I think that just points to this whole distinction. Like my guess is that a lot of times inside of companies, when people are talking about AI and they're kind of like lost in the development part of it, and they don't really know why. And it's because the process was never clear. And so you're just like chasing your tail. And it's hard to even recognize that, I think.
Yeah, and for us, it started out with like a series of N8N processes and flows that you did, which in them itself were spaghetti and hard. It's so hard to like lift up into this format, right? So now, again, I'm not done with this, but I'll go through and do another pass and be like, oh, actually, this is just like, qualify part, qualify. This step 1, qualify, qualify, qualify. Step 2, 3, 4, 5, that's like a little group. But that's where this house format will kind of expand itself. But, as it goes, I'm not going to read through too many of these, but I tried to add something where if it writes to HubSpot, it puts this little emoji. Otherwise, like it's the effects, right? Because like you can just have a bunch of AI stuff run and not be worried about it like being super like stress tested, because it's not really writing anything. It might just be needed to be tested in a different way. Whereas if you're coming here, you're like, oh, cool. This one writes 1 HubSpot note per company. That's very clear to see what this part of this thing is doing. When you get to the structure cleanup stuff where we are messing with HubSpot in like major ways, this does become much more important to be like, hey, this actually doesn't write anything because there's a gate, and like I might take that gate out because it was more of a testing gate, but at some point the reconciler is going to make a lot of writes. It's going to do a lot of stuff, and I just haven't gotten to updating here yet. So these are some like little tweaks that I've been making as I've been saying, well, what if we like, what do I want to see later to be like, when Steve asked me, yo, when does it actually like give me something? I can be like, oh, step 7, like the outreach brief. You give it this company, and you are not going to see anything until like, and again, this is not right yet because I'm not done, but it actually will write some stuff to HubSpot sooner, right? Because there is, if this wasn't a run in our HubSpot, we have a company type and an AI company, like a date that it was set, right? So there's just a bunch of, and I know you've talked about this a lot internally in the past, where it's like, hey, when we write something, we should say when we wrote it, and like some of them need why we wrote it too. And so I'm just going back now and extracting from the code, which already had a lot of this stuff built in. But no one wants to look at that UI, because like the UI is like not for human. It's not for people. It's for builder. It's for like the engineer.
Yeah.
To like work on it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, maybe what that ends up pointing to is that this like house format, as an example, right now it's not capturing the output, or like it's capturing like, hey, step 2 starts with this trigger, but it doesn't say step 2 ends with this output, and so that may be necessary. I don't know. I mean, we talked about this on Monday as a group, but I'm very confident that this AI-ification paradigm is a real thing, and that I've seen plenty of convergence around this from other people. But the specific details of this stage, that stage, this format, that format, like I expect that we're going to work through those over the next month and have plenty to like report on there for how to make it useful.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. Like, I think when we do 20 of these, we'll be like, hey, here's the format. And I don't think any of us want to be like, oh, hey, well, this new like house format has 10 fields or 20 fields across. It's like, no, like it's just for humans to like peruse, and for a model to understand how things work at a high level. It can go in the code if it needs to do that. Like,
yes, totally.
This is like the gray area of, is it for a person? Is it for an LLM? It's for both. Like, make it for both. So, all right,
my turn.
That's what I got this week. Yeah, your turn.
All right, cool. You want to bring my window in?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So I'm going to go over something that I don't know how much we've talked about it. It's been pretty light if we have. But the first thing that I'm showing on the screen here, I've been working on this in the background, but I've shown this before. This is like our entire accountability chart from 2024. And I've made some fun modifications to it. So you can now see like the grayed out ones are no longer people. So they're like accountabilities that have been like folded into other roles. So if I go up here to the two that I occupy, the visionary and integrator, there were three things I was doing in this visionary accountability. It was fundraising and investor relations, this concept from EOS of like quote unquote 20 ideas, which is just, hey, like somebody in the company needs to be the font of ideas. And then key external relationships. So key external relationships includes, maybe some of the key customer relationships like restaurants, but also like industry, right? So business development, like the restaurant tech space, that kind of thing. So this is, I just wanted to situate this thing that I was working on inside of like the AI-ification of offline, right? This is the business development system that me and one of our advisor investors, Paul Dryden, used to run like manually. And this is my first like serious attempt to apply some AI to it. So I also, this is another little pet project. I made an interface for viewing my JSON-L logs because I don't like pulling up old chats. So this is one of my chats where I built this business development process. So I was just gonna like walk you through, like this right here means this was my initial prompt, and then here's Claude's response, and then here's me. And so this goes back even further. I couldn't dig back into the history and find it, but my prompts start, I think it's fun to show people like how bad some of these like prompts are. I'm like, hey, at some point in the past, I had been brainstorming a business development process for offline that would look up Eater, Toast, 7 Rooms, DoorDash, and stuff, and would look for open jobs announcements and stuff like that. Can you see if you can find that? I don't know if I ever committed anything, if it was here on my laptop, if it was on my studio. So at some point I had made some rough notes about this, right? So Claude goes and finds that. And then I, once it found it, I said, can you remind me what this thing is supposed to do? Like, I don't know why this keeps resetting, sorry. Was there an end-to-end process, and so Claude explains to me, hey, this thing that you were trying to build is supposed to keep you, David, like warm with executives at these different companies. There were 55 contacts, and it says this was this effort that you and Paul had started, and the bot is supposed to revive it and sustain it. So I basically go down and I just start to do in real time this AI-ification thing of what is the process and what is the context that one of these bots would really need. So the first thing it did is it was like, I gave it a company like Vox or Eater, right? And it was like, okay, cool. I have all the contacts that you have at Vox and Eater. Now I'm going to go out and like impersonate you and Paul's business development mind and tell you what should you do to stay warm with those contacts.
Yeah.
And the first draft was terrible. Like it was so bad. And I realized, okay, what context is it missing? The context that's missing is, what is the narrative arc of this relationship? It's just like the outreach brief for the SDR, right? What's the history? And you can't just go make it on the fly. Like it has to be an artifact that you can refer to. Okay. So I said, you don't really understand the state of play with each of these people. And I can't tell if that's from a lazy reading of the threads or the calendar invites. You need to go get the narrative context for what happened with Eater, this arc And I this needs to be part of this now, right? So if I go over and I look at in Finder, if I find like the actual folder, let's see the eater folder. What you'll see now is this doc, and I have this for every business development relationship of what is the narrative. So it goes all the way back. All this is in my email, right? All of it. It's either in my email or my text, and Claude has access to both. And so it was able to go back and say, hey, there were 2 cold conversations. You cold emailed Ryan Pauly, you cold emailed Shira Smart. Then it took a detour through editorial and product. Then there was an inflection where you started talking about M&A, there was diligence. And now we're in this sort of like, hey, there's no M&A here. We're just sort of like in this relationship and trying to figure out what that looked like going forward, right? Then once it has that, it can situate everything else inside that narrative. And all of a sudden the output was massively better, right? So this is another great example of like process context on the fly. So I'm like, okay, now that you have this really critical context piece of what the narrative arc is, now you know that you could reconstruct that for any company I give you. So if I give you Toast, if I give you the infatuation or whatever, you now have a step of like narrative arc construction that you can do, right? And then what are you going to do next, right? So I'm going to tell you to use Chrome DevTools. You're going to go look every time I ask you to do biz dev. You're going to go look for new press releases. You're going to look up what jobs are open. You're going to go look at people on LinkedIn. You're going to store that so that you're not constantly recreating all of it. So that leads to the artifact that is called timeline. So this is a timeline of everything that Claude dug up during that run that then it can just diff against in the future. It's not like creating it from scratch every single time, right? And then it's driving Claude for Chrome, and it's going and doing LinkedIn for every single person. What have they been posting about? Is any of it relevant to the relationship? Can I go in there and like engage with this content? So basically through that back and forth, this was the first session. I then went back and in our show notes, this process mapping skill, you can point it at a previous session and you can say, hey, go look at that session and extract from that session what process I was running, right? So that's what I did. I went back and I was like, go find that. And then what has been built now is a finished playbook here for biz dev where it has the whole process. Here are the 5 phases. You're going to make sure the contact list is right. You're going to go write that config file. You're going to do an intel sweep of the prior relationship, et cetera, et cetera. So now I have a reliable, repeatable way every time I want to sit down and work on business development to either add a new company to that schema. So I was talking to somebody at Eater. We were talking about Dorsia, which is like this high-end reservation startup that came out like 3 years ago, made a bunch of noise, haven't heard from him since. I was able to go in and say, hey, just add Dorsia to my biz dev pipeline. And it knew exactly what that meant. It was like, there is no prior history. Here's all the contacts. Here's everything I could find about them.
That's so cool.
And then just for fun, and this we may need to flag this for redaction. I'm not sure, but I went ahead this morning and I just said, hey, can you tell me about the latest biz dev with Eater? And it was able to pull the whole timeline, the last conversation that I had, that the fact that Vox has split into 2 things, and then like link all that through to the meetings that I had last week about a consulting relationship with Eater. And I can, I can like rely on that output and not wonder, like, is this thing hallucinating? Does it understand the relationship? Does it understand, any of that stuff? So another accountability in the massive accountability chart is now on my end tagged as like AI enabled, because this this process that I'm using for corp dev could really be extended to like any key external relationship where it's a big enough deal that I want to monitor the narrative arc, any press, anything that's changing about that company. So that's
yeah.
that's
If we're
that.
talking
any
about
questions?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If we have if we're working through the AI-ification engine, right? And I'm not going to put it
Yes.
back up. You can keep it here. You did process mapping. You did context
Yes.
mapping. That was what you
Yes.
showed. Input
Yes.
output collections. You did that too because you gave it some inputs like Dorsia, and then you were like, or like you gave it these are existing ones that were good, right?
Yeah. So I would say input output. I kind of did it. I probably skipped it, you know, like the technical definition of it, I skipped. In my head, I had a picture of the output because I did that process with Paul.
Yes.
And so I knew what I was looking for. I think input output becomes really critical when you yourself, like me, David, was not can't have that picture in their head. Like if I'm doing input, if I'm doing something for a consulting client, or I'm trying to help Steve with a process that he's running, and I actually don't know what the outputs look like, I'm blind.
Yeah.
In this case, I know. And so I, like in the back of my mind, as we're going through that chat, I'm like, this outputs, you know, tweak it via new process steps or new context steps. And then I was doing essentially skipping straight to agent impersonation. Like, can I do this manually with an agent in a chat, get an output that I'm happy with? Yeah. Now I would say if we were going to put this on the board, which I should, I didn't have it when I did this. I'll add it after the show. I would put it in deployment, or maybe actually it would be an architecture spike, because I don't know where it's going to
be
live.
Like, where is this? Like,
yes,
is it probably just on your computer when you trigger it, or there's some cron that runs on your computer, right?
Right. Well, and you know, I think it may be fine. Like there are some AI processes that you're like, you know what, if this ran once a week, it would be a waste of tokens. Like I need it when I need it. It's okay if it runs on demand. It's not breaking anything downstream. So it may end up going through that and then essentially being in the iterative loop, because every time I run it, I'm like, okay, did I get what I wanted out of it? Or is there still like tweaking that needs to happen? Right.
Yeah. I think that's why we call it architecture spike, is because you don't need to build an architecture. You just need to kind of decide where it's going to go for the purpose that it's going to be living for. Right. Like,
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Which is who's going to run it? Do they need to just run it, or do they need to be able to tweak it? Do they need to be able to interact with the output, or is it like kind of a read-only situation? I mean, there's definitely a heuristic for choosing that architecture that I think you and I, again, it's like crock potting. Like I don't think we quite know, but there will be some kind of Planko board at some point that's like, if these things are true, this architecture makes sense. If these things are true, this architecture makes sense. And then that evolves as the companies release new features.
Yeah, you know, and there's a piece of this that I'm thinking of too, where as you're at the ongoing evaluation, like that's where it's just living now forever, right?
Yeah.
And there does, like, that biz dev stuff, like at some interval, you're going to want to tell people about it, or it might want to do its own summarization for everybody within offline. Right, to where it's like distribution, like what's the next step after like we evaluate it, and it's like, yeah, it's working, we want to distribute the learnings to somebody. Right now you're just grabbing the learnings when you feel like you want them on some investor level, right? I don't know, that's like where my head goes next, where it's like, who needs to see this? And I think some of it's built into the ongoing evaluation stuff. Like if you look at the process for like what we call the first redemption for a new partner, like if I go like into the process, which I won't show here, I don't see it. Like the output, actually, let me show this, because like,
yeah.
So like I clicked into the first redemption. If I'm looking at this trigger, it's a customer IO campaign, first offer redemption. Is this member or
this is member? Yeah.
Okay, this is member. Okay, yeah. So this one is more like the output is a member gets an email with like a congratulation email.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I think a lot of that's built into the process itself, so that when you put it in here, the end result is going to be something, whether that end result right now is just it writing to a file on your computer. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. That's great. Or it could just be once a month or like once a quarter, there's your other process grabs the outputs from this one.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I think that what ongoing evaluation means for which processes is still something that we're figuring out. And so not to get too meta, but like in the work stream side, there is a card that right now is in process mapping for how you do evaluation. It's that one, right? Because I'm like, I don't know how you once you have 50 agent processes that are all running, but they all are different. Like some of them are running through a plugin, some of them are running in Cloudflare, some of them are running like one time for me, like this biz dev one. What does that mean for how you make sure it's all quote unquote like working and on? And it's different. It's different depending on the architecture and how like maybe business critical it is for like day-to-day operations. And so all I've been doing is throwing into this card, I'll basically like look at a process, try to figure out how we would monitor it, and then just store the output of that in this card until we have a big enough sample size to figure out what the process even is, So it's probably really a triage, like it's not even, I don't even know how to do it yet.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. A lot of meta stuff there.
A lot.
What would Becca tell us that we're supposed to do at the end of an episode? Didn't we get some feedback on that?
Oh gosh. I really wish I hadn't just gone on vacation for 2 weeks. She probably would want us to and this is what it's going to be from now on. It's just us like trying to remember. We will not use AI for this part. I would bet she would want us to be like, say, hey, you can go to the redacted show notes and see anything. You can find David here and Taylor here. Where would yours be?
I think it's either LinkedIn or my personal website, which is davidmshaner.com. And then you can find Offline, which is the company that, of course, all of this like automation is on behalf of at letsgetoffline.com.
Yeah, cool. Mine would be, I don't know. I have a heytaylor.dev is my website, which links to like everything. So that's probably good. Still, cool. I think she'd want us to tell people that we are always looking for guests, and we have a guest. We have a guest. Yeah, we're going to be recording pretty soon with our first guest. Okay, I think she'd also like if we're looking at the Redacted podcast page and you want to come hang out with us and talk about stuff. If we'll again link this in the show note. Episodes, we'll have all the episodes on there. If you want to be on the show, like this is kind of what we are. This is how we think about it. Do you want to like kind of describe? Oh, sorry, you can't see it. Sorry. This is how we are thinking about. Should you come on the show? Yes. Yeah. Like, do you fit in one of these boxes?
Yeah, I was actually on my friend Alex's podcast, and he was asking me how we look for guests, and I was like, look, two things. Number one, if you are, of course, building with AI is like a prereq, right? Like you're doing AI, right? But the number one is like if you're in meetings and you're the person that's always like, oh, let me share my screen and show you what I'm talking about, then that's a clue. Like that's a clue that you have the right mind for this kind of thing. You're like a compulsive, like show don't tell person. And then in terms of who we aim to interview, what Taylor has up on the screen is a giant grid. And it's basically like on one side of the grid is the function, engineering, product design, marketing, sales, finance, ops, support. Like, are you in one of those buckets or multiple buckets? On the other axis is how big the company is. So as an example, we might want to have a guest on that is doing design at a team smaller than 10 people and show us how they're doing that with AI, because I know the same person using AI doing design in a company of 500 plus is going to be doing it totally differently because the org is different, the constraints are different, the security is different. So we're really trying to fill in for us and for the audience. How are people building? Can they show us how they're building? And how does that change as the company gets bigger? Because I'm 100% sure it changes in like big ways.
Yep. Cool.
That's it.
I think that's it.
All right. See you next time, man.
Later.
All right.